Hello, BookTube. Well, it's happened once again that we have mail, even though it's a Sunday. That has just happened. I am happy about it. All of this stuff must have arrived earlier, and one thing I know did, but all of it must have arrived earlier, and I just didn't know about it until today, but that's fine. That leaves no gap in our live-action videos. So let's look at this stuff. We have 2 periodicals and 2 packages. One of the periodicals I know arrived earlier. It is this. It is a facsimile edition of Fantastic Four number 50. And by facsimile edition, I mean it's got everything. It's got all of the original artwork of the Fantastic Four finally defeating Galactus, but it's also got the original ads. You know, sell grit and make some money for yourself. Hypnotize people, or even tragically buy a little pet monkey. God only knows what happened to those creatures, how miserable they were until they died a miserable death. And also, in addition to that, the facsimile editions have the original letter pages. The original letters page. Marvel Comics and DC Comics don't run letters anymore, because what would be the point? No one reads their comics, so there's no one deeply involved in the storyline, so there's no mail to publish, not even email. But once upon a time, they got letters from all over the place, from all over the country, all over the world, especially military bases. And when you look at these old letters pages, I'm always tempted to look around for people who then entered the industry. That often happens. You will be reading a letters page, and some precocious 13-year-old from Hoboken will be writing a letter, and you recognize their name because they're going to go on to become a writer or an artist or even editor-in-chief. And there's a letter here from Hollis, New York. This would have been the late 1960s. An adulatory letter writing to Stan Lee about Beware the Hidden Land, and finishing up with let's see here. A letter which I received the other day said that a motion picture company wanted the rights to produce a movie about some of our heroes. Come on, tell your frantic fans which one. Of course, little did anyone guess in the late 1960s that movies about Marvel characters would go on to make billions and billions of dollars. Would become the #1 most successful film franchise in history. No one suspected that. Of course, that has not happened with the Fantastic Four. The studio is hoping that it will, but it hasn't happened yet. Although I myself have a very soft spot for those original Ewan Griffith Fantastic Four movies. I know that they can be a little silly, but I like them. But anyway, the writer of the letter goes on. Okay, guys, this is the end of my letter. So until Irving Forbush is arrested for reading Brand Eck, I will say in the time-honored words of Black Bolt, and then nothing, a blank space. Because Black Bolt, the king of the Inhumans, cannot speak. So the time-honored words of Black Bolt, nothing. And that letter is from Gerard Conway, who, unless I miss my guess, went on to a rather popular career in Marvel Comics. But here we get classic Jack Kirby artwork, the 4-panel page, but also spreading out his wings whenever he wants to here. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Of course, I couldn't help but notice this facsimile edition is $5. And I was looking, one of the things that's reprinted faithfully in this issue is a list of other Marvel comics out at the time. There's even a house ad for some of them. We have Spider-Man number 36, Avengers 27, X-Men 19, Daredevil 15, Thor 127, which is pictured in this issue. It's the climax of a fantastic storyline, also by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, that they did a house ad for. Yeah. That issue right there is on the stands now. That is the latest issue of Thor. And it's incredible. I've read it a million times. More times than I've read this. Also, there's Strange Tales, Suspense Tales, Astonishing Tales, Sergeant Fury, all that sort of stuff. But you get Spider-Man, the Avengers, the X-Men, Daredevil not so much, Thor. I was buying all of those at the time that I was buying the Fantastic Four. And then there was DC Comics, the home of Real Heroes in 1967 or 69 or whatever this came out, that had Adventure Comics, World's Finest, Superman, Action Comics, Batman, Detective Comics, Justice League, a whole bunch of stuff that I was buying there as well. And all of those things together in any given month, let alone week, would have been less money than that. $5, that was... If you'd have told me then that I would be paying $5 for a reprint issue, I would have been astonished. $5 was a really good meal at a restaurant. Anyway, so that was one of the periodicals. And the other periodical is the New Yorker. How is that for a cover? Try telling me that isn't going to end up framed on David Murphy's wall. That is just awesome. A window washer has just stopped to read. That is just awesome. And there was an article earlier in an earlier issue of the New Yorker about New York parking, about parking in New York City. And I had a feeling that it would get a deluge of letters, and it did. The whole letters column is devoted to it. And one of them struck me as rather sort of typifying the whole unreal nightmare of New York parking. I lived in the Bronx and Manhattan for 30 years, and I spent much of that time looking for parking. On numerous occasions, I'd circle a 10-block radius so monotonously that by the next day, I'd forgotten where I parked. I either walked around or hailed a cab to drive me through my neighborhood until I found my car. During the winter, I prayed for snowstorms large enough to force the city to suspend alternate side parking. Suffice to say that, much like other city dwellers, I woke up every morning asking myself the same three questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? And where am I going to park? So I haven't read the rest of the issue, but that was a very good start. A wonderful letter and also a great cover. So let's look at the packages now. I'm sorry, I've got hair all over me because I just gave the little baby a trim. Just a bit of a trim. Just a bit, that's all. She's pouting, but it was just a bit of a trim. It was very much needed. It was, baby girl. She doesn't particularly like trims at all, but she puts up with them. So let's look at this first one. The second one is a box, and I think it's a box from one of you. But the first one is just from a publisher. So let's see what this is. Okay. All right. Don't recognize this. This comes out in September. This is by Tim Berners-Lee, and it is called "This Is for Everyone: The Unfinished Story of the World Wide Web," by the man who invented it. Let's see here. Since its invention in 1989, the World Wide Web has changed everything. That is not an exaggeration. That is absolutely true. People talk all the time when the subject comes up of, people will ask me when apparently they have a different idea of what it is to be 28 than I do. They'll say, "You've lived through so much history. What's it like? What do you consider to be the most epical invention? Is it the proliferation of nuclear war? Is it whatnot?" And I always say the internet, easily, the internet. Transforming humanity into the first digital species. Through the web, we live, work, dream, quarrel, and connect. Guilty on all counts. It has launched a new era of creativity and collaboration while unleashing powerful forces that imperil truth and privacy and polarize public debate. As artificial intelligence supercharges the online experience, the stakes of understanding the web's origins and evolution and guiding its future has never been greater. In this book, the web's inventor, Sir Timothy Berners-Lee, recounts the story of his iconic creation and offers a vital perspective on today's most urgent technological questions. With his trademark humor and candor, he recounts how he arrived at CERN, the European Council for Nuclear Research, as a young engineer. At a time when the internet's use was primarily academic, he foresaw its potential as a tool to connect people, information, and ideas. By inventing the World Wide Web, he realized this vision. Okay, so this is more of an autobiography? How I wish it had an index. There's one particular name I'm looking for in this index. I don't know if it'll be in the book. I guess I'll find out when the autumn comes. Okay, so this is at least in part an autobiography of Tim Berners-Lee, and maybe naturally an autobiography of the internet as well. Okay, great. Well, this comes out in early September. So as interesting as I find the subject, of course I do. I live entirely on the internet. I live and I earn my money. I earn my keep on the internet. I also argue with people on the internet. I seek advice on the internet. I joke with people on the internet. So naturally the subject is of deep interest to me, but I think I'll probably wait until the autumn. I'll wait until I get a finished copy before I start reading it, because I have a lot of other stuff to read. And then we have the box here, which is sent from one of you. Let's see here. Yes, there's a note. Good, excellent. Then there's a little cardboard padding. Oh, okay. Well, we start off every box to Steve starts off with tribute. In this case, Mega Stuff Oreos, which is excellent tribute. But I can't believe this is just going to be Mega Stuff Oreos. There's going to be a book in here. Oh, fantastic. Oh, great. Okay. All right. Great. This is Ronald Steele's book, Walter Lippmann and the American Century, in a nice hardcover, in a nice durable hardcover. Fantastic. One of you, it may even have been the same person, sent me the trade paperback of this book. Because there's a so-called intellectual biography of Walter Lippmann, who is, you'd have to Google him. He was a figure that the like of which we don't really have today, or rather, the like of which we do have, but they have entirely been captured by one side of the culture war or the other. Imagine if that weren't true. Imagine if we had a so-called public intellectual in 2025 who was not simply for effing sale. Imagine if we had that. Imagine a public intellectual. What do we have now? On the side of the culture war that is not steeped to its eyeballs in BS and actually doesn't believe in theocracy or killing people, we have, I guess, Sam Harris. And on the other side, that is entirely full to its eyeballs with BS and does believe in theocracy and killing people, we have Jordan Peterson. So they have a roughly equivalent standing, one on the side of good and one on the side of evil. But imagine if there weren't sides. Imagine if neither one of them had sold out to anybody. Then what? Then what would happen? Then what would that figure be like? If there is such a person now, I don't know it. I don't know of them, or they're not coming to mind. But once upon a time, there were, and Walter Lippmann was one of them. A lot more prolific, a lot better a prose stylist than a lot of his equivalent public intellectuals. And there's a relatively new intellectual biography of Walter Lippmann. I forget. I think it might be Princeton that does it. I never got the finished copy. I haven't yet. And I don't know. I read it, and I also sent a copy to David Murphy, and I think we had very similar reactions. There's a thing when you review books. There's those of you who do review books will know this. There's a kind of book that you get where, what would you say about it? Well, that's the question that you have. Now, it's different if you're on deadline for a paying editor. Then you can ask that question, but you also have to put it aside, because you do have to say something about it. You can't just say that. The minute you write to a paying editor and say, well, I don't really have anything to say about it, he will say, okay, totally understand. No problem. And you will never hear from him again. You will never get any work. And if you ask for it, he'll put you off. Politely. He'll say, I really haven't got anything for you. So you must never do that with a paying editor. But Open Letters Review, which is where I am an editor, where David runs his work, much to the chagrin of the rest of the publishing world. For God's sake. I mean, honestly, I'm not exactly a newcomer when it comes to this sort of thing. It's insane that I am still the only editor publishing both David Murphy and Joe Spivey. That is insane. I refuse to believe that they don't make commissioning editors, actual paycheck in hand editors, with the same kind of instincts that I do. They're both the real deal. I've made a lifelong skill out of spotting the real deal, and yet I'm the only one publishing them at the moment. But anyway, if you're not, Open Letters doesn't pay. We don't pay for our reviews. That's what makes it the perfect entree point if you want to build a string file or build a resume of published work, so that you can eventually find somebody who will pay you. We don't pay. But even so, I mean, we don't pay, so we don't have that ultimatum. Right, where somebody writes a memoir about talking to Jesus in their bathtub. Well, if I've been commissioned to review that thing for money, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it on deadline. I'm going to make an entertaining job out of it. But for open letters, I send out books all the time to people, totally on spec. Do you think you can do something with this? Do you think you can write an interesting review of this? And sometimes, as I think David discovered with that intellectual biography of Walter Lippmann, sometimes the answer to that question is just no. Just no. Usually, I don't want to speak for him. For me, with that Walter Lippmann book, my thought was, this is earnest enough so that I don't want to pan it, but it's also boring enough so that I don't want to praise it. I don't even want to make what I write about it construable as praise. My reaction when I read that intellectual biography is that you would be much better off spending time reading Walter Lippmann, which is not good. I mean, that's a high bar to pass anyway, just objectively speaking. What if, for instance, I know it's harder to sell today, but I've got public intellectuals on the mind, if you were to write a biography of Samuel Johnson, my beloved Samuel Johnson. People today don't read Samuel Johnson. No one reads Lives of the Poets. If they did, they would see immediately what I'm talking about. He's a bolt of lightning in an open field. Lives of the Poets, even the dashed off ones, even the ones that aren't polished, show that clearly. He is an absolute bolt of lightning. Everything that he wrote is like that, I think, of course. And you face that problem if you write a biography of him. Is your biography going to do something that he doesn't do? I mean, it's going to do fact stuff, sure, but Wikipedia will do that. And it's the same thing with a whole bunch of figures in the world. A whole bunch of them. Virginia Woolf, Benjamin Franklin, Samuel Pepys, a whole bunch of figures that you could think of writing a biography for. You're going to have to bring something to the table that at least equals something that they do. When I read that book, I thought of this book, which does that. It does that in spades. This is exactly what I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of what that book didn't do. Not necessarily equaling Lippmann's range of reading or erudition. Very few people then could do that. Almost no one can do it today. But equaling him somehow, in some way. Grip on the reader, worldview, generosity of spirit, whatever it is. You have to... This book does that. And I was hoping that intellectual biography would do something like that. Instead, I was just impatient the whole time, which is not good for a biography, even if that thing's not very long. But you don't want to be impatient the whole time that you're reading it. You don't want to be thinking, oh, I'd rather be reading this book, or I'd rather be reading Lippmann himself. You don't want to be thinking that. And what's a good example of what I'm talking about? I'm looking at my biography shelves now. Yeah, okay. Mac's book, A Prince of Our Disorder, his biography of Lawrence of Arabia. Well, Lawrence of Arabia not only did what I consider to be criminally overlooked good translations, but he also wrote one of the great works of nonfiction in the 20th century, Seven Pillars of Wisdom. An absolutely towering work, a genuine immortal masterpiece of literature in the 20th century. But A Prince of Our Disorder, it's about him, and you're not ever impatient when you're reading it. You're not ever tapping your toe saying, well, gee, I wish I could put this down and go to Seven Pillars of Wisdom. No, because it's giving you something else. It's doing something genuine with the subject. And I'm looking at these shelves, and I could find other things like that. A really good older biography of Washington Irving that is fascinating on its own, even though Irving is great to read and wrote about all that stuff himself. Not Francis Bacon. Not Francis Bacon. A laundry list would be more interesting than anything Francis Bacon wrote, so that doesn't really count. Who was another literary figure? Mark Twain. Ron Chernow just a bit in his gigantic new book, but also Ron Powers before him on his biography of Mark Twain. You are reading that because you are fascinated by it as a book. You are not ever tempted, tapping your toe, to go back to the original, even though the original is great. I don't know if I'm making any of this clear, but now at least David has had that experience with a couple of books. David's still a comparatively new new reviewer, and he has now had that experience with a couple of books, where if your editor is your friend, and if there's no money on the table, then you can look at a book and just say, there's not really much to do with this. You have to be careful of that. You want to make sure that's not just laziness. I don't think that's a problem with David. So I think instead he looked at the book and thought, what would I do with it? I could use a review, the 800 words of the review, to write about Lippmann and quote Lippmann, but then why am I bothering to do that if I'm allegedly writing about a new biography? And if I write about that biography, at every turn I'm going to be saying this could be more lively. He read this piece that Lippmann wrote about, I don't know, the League of Nations or whatever. He doesn't seem to understand it very well. The author doesn't understand it as well as I do, and I'm not even a Lippmann expert. If you're going to be writing that about the book and no one's paying you to do it, well, it seems like a lot of effort to do the author dirty. You're not that you're caring about the author's feelings. It feels like a waste of time to do. It's akin to what editors of mine over the decades have described as burying a book in silence. We'll bury it in silence. But it's not worth an excoriation, and you can't legitimately praise it. So we won't do either one. We'll just bury it in silence. I guess we do that at Open Letters. For once upon a time, a decade ago, I let no book go by. None at all. I found a way to write about even the ones that just sat there limply, and I really should get back to doing that. Because all authors want something. They want some kind of response. And also, not to put too fine a point on it, but with Open Letters Review, I'm in the perfect position to do that. There's no editor telling me I can't. I can take any tack I want. I can be as generous or ungenerous as I want. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but I'm very happy to have this. That book made me want this one more and more. And once upon a time, at the Brattle Bookshop, my used bookstore, I would see 3 of these in a year out in the sale lot for $1. 3 hardcovers. Just that. I don't remember how many times I've seen this out there, but when I want one, first of all, I wanted it when I knew that book was coming, before I'd read it. I wanted a copy of this. I realized I didn't have it. I realized I really liked it, and none were showing up. Then I got the ARC, still looking everywhere for this thing and not finding it. And you know what's going to happen now? Now that I have the hardcover, because someone sent me the trade paperback, and I did my best to be careful, but it blew apart on me, just flew into pieces. So I knew that I needed the hardcover, and you know what's going to happen now. Now that I have the hardcover, the next time I go to the Brattle, there are going to be 3 copies of this thing. I just know it. But in the meantime, I do have the hardcover, so that's great. That's fantastic. I actually do. I tried rereading that trade paperback. I was too distracted by how delicate I needed to be. I really didn't do much rereading. Now I can, so that's great. This will probably go on the pile for tonight. I am being drawn Song of the Siren style to reading about the Earl of Oxford. But this will go on the pile for tonight. And then there's this thing. This is for everyone. The Story of the Internet, which will be for later. It will be for the end of summer. So there you go. There's that. There's Mega Stuff Oreos. There's the New Yorker. There's the Fantastic Four, where the Silver Surfer fights Galactus on behalf of Earth, and neither one of them really wants to fight each other. And that's it. That's some Sunday mail. Always nice to get Sunday mail. It's a very hot day. We're going to be in the low 90s Fahrenheit. That's very hot. That will start to heat up the pavement on some of these little tootsies. That will mean that someone will get overheated very quickly. So I don't know that we'll be doing much in the way of exercise today or tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be even hotter. But I now have plenty of goodies to while away the time. I have wanted to reread this. I really just sink down and reread it. Apparently there is no ebook. Now I have the hardcover. I will put a plastic covering over this thing, and then it will just stay in my library, which is great. That's just where it should have stayed. God only knows what happened to the last hardcover that I had. But don't you worry, I have not given up. David Murphy has had that experience now a couple of times where I send him a book. I send him lots of review copies. I also try to get publishers to send him review copies because you never know what's going to strike a reviewer's fancy. And Open Letters really is that kind of an ad hoc venture. I'm not assigning anything to anyone because I'm not paying anyone. So it really is. I want to parade as many books as I can in front of good reviewers in order to see what attracts their interest. And although he has had this experience a few times, he has also had the experience of finding a book that maybe isn't the greatest thing in the world, but it is fodder for conversation. Maybe the author is doing something interesting. Maybe it might not be the best thing that anyone's ever done on the subject, but it's still worth a review. So that's good. That's good. It's probably good for a reviewer to have that experience where you get something and just think, this thing just sits on the page. What am I supposed to do with it? I think it's a good experience to write a review anyway of such a book. It could be that this is such a book. I think it's a good experience to do, but I understand when people don't want that experience unless they're being paid for it. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. That was some Sunday mail. So I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.